Welcome back, everyone. Today we will discuss how to find domain and range of a square root function. Okay, so this is a square root function, right? Here a is coefficient, right? B is a constant. Now, since we see that for here, square root function in square root you can never have negative number. Here you can never have negative number. Okay, never negative number. Okay, what does it mean if you don't have negative number? That's mean you, no matter what, you cannot have any negative number here. Anything, if you have negative, if you ended up negative values in the square root, that is undefined. So that's mean inside whatever we have, it has to be more than 0 or 0 to be defined, right? For the domain, you can just write down x plus b has to be more than 0. So if you solve it, you get x is b by a, right? So that will be your domain, okay? Because it has to be more than 0 or 0. Also, if you notice it, if our coefficient is negative, let's say a is negative, what would have been happen? Let's say then we had to change the sign here. So negative, let's say negative ax plus b 0. So we got negative ax and negative b. That's mean x b over a. You see, we have to change, we have to flip the sign here just to make sure you guys understand that. So the point here, what I was trying to make, so the domain will be what? So the domain will be now, so domain will, this function will be x is always b over a, negative, right? And for the range, for any function, the range, any square root of function, range is y is all the real number, but it has to be more than 0 no matter what. It has to be more than 0 or so let's do some practice that will clear up our concept. So here, this is one of the basic root function, right? So for the domain of this function is x, right? X all the real number, and but here x has to be more than 0. Okay, 0 or more than 0, it cannot be less than 0 here. And for the range, we already know what will be the range. Range is just all the, because in here when you draw the function you get something like this, right? So that's mean here you see, if we look at it, you cannot see any, what is called, you cannot see the x is all the number which is more than 0 or 0, right? And y is also, it never touches, it never goes to under 0, okay, for the root function. Okay, let's do another one now. Let's do y equal 3x plus 5, okay? What will happen in this case? So for the domain and range in this function will be, domain will be here. This function has to be, this one has to be more than 0. So 3x plus 5, let's just do it more than 0 or equal 0, okay? So that's mean, what do we get? Here we get x, when you solve it, x equal negative 5 by 3. So this will be your domain. So a lot of people ask me to write it down in interval notation for the domain. So for this specific function, interval notation of the domain will be that's mean it cannot be less than -5/3. Okay, has to be more than 3 and infinity. That's gonna be your domain. And for the range, it's just gonna be zero. It cannot, remember that the range cannot be less than 0, right? So in the interval notation, it's gonna be 0 to infinity. And if you do the set builder notation, it's gonna be just all the real number, so y has to be more than 0. Okay, so we'll do set builder notation because that's much more comfortable uh, to, and you guys just can change it to interval notation by yourself. It doesn't matter. So let's dive into the next one. What do we have now? We have right now we have f of x equal -5x plus 3, right? What's the domain and range for this one? So for the domain will be, again, is going to be same. So we have to write down -5x plus 3, and it has to be more than 0, right? So if we calculate it, we get x -5x, right? Okay, x -5, x is going to be more than -3. So if we do x, we have to change the flip, since we have to change the sign, 3/5. So this is our domain. So you can just write down domain, just x is 3/5. And the range, we have the same range. Remember that all the time we have the same range. Y, all the real number, and it has to be more than 0. Okay. Now for this one looks interesting, right? It's just gonna be, since look, since the sign is changed, for the domain we have to change the sign, that's all. So it's gonna be x has to be less than 0, because in this case, if x is more than 0, then we get the negative number. But if we get the negative less than 0, we get the positive number. Like let's say we have positive number 1, right? What do you get? So x equal 1, so we get f of x equal -1, which is undefined. But if it's less than 0, any kind of number, let's say x equal -2, if we get x equal negative, then it's -2, which is square root of 2, positive. So it is defined. So that's why I said for this function, x is less than 0. Okay, so the range is always the same. Y is always more than 0, no matter what function you have. Okay, now let's do another one. This one is the exactly same. It's just the coefficient. This one is just the coefficient. Okay, 3/5 is the coefficient, so you don't have to worry anything about that. And for other one, and we have the 3 here, right? So +3. So domain and range will be here. It's just when you do the calculation, first solve for this one, write down domain has to be x has to be more than whatever we have here, 3/5. So sorry, let me just write it down. 3/5x has to be +8 has to be more than 0, right? So that we don't get negative number. So if we calculate this one, we get x is more than -5. That is our domain. And for the range, is always the same. Y is always more than 0. Okay, so now let's do this one again. So since we have, I want just to make a point, since we have negative here, it's going to change the sign. The coefficient is negative. That's mean instead of in the int domain, will be less than whatever we left, right? So let's do it. So the domain will be this one. We can just write on x, and we can solve that. 4 by 3 x minus 9 equals 0. Sorry, is more than 0, right? Equal or more than 0. So what do we get? We get here, so negative 4 by 3 x, we can just get 9 here. So if we flip it, so 27 over 4. So x, we get it like this, 27 over 4. So that's our domain, okay? This is going to be our domain, negative 27 over 4. So this is our domain, just write it down. And for the range is the same. Y is always more than 0. Hope you guys understand. If you guys have any question, please ask